Well, hello. I'm Dr. Ben. Again, this is my second video. So I'm still trying to figure out how to do everything. This is part of a project called Chasing the Dragon. I'm a clinical psychologist. I currently work at a prison, and I have roughly 20 to 25 people at any given time on my caseload. So I wanted to talk about the topic today. I think it's probably one of my favorite topics, and I'm probably the least qualified to give it. And it's on healthy relationships. So I'm going to give the concepts, and hopefully this is helpful. Give you something to think about. And I think a lot of times when we talk about healthy relationships, most of the time we're focused more on like intimate relationships and things like that. But what I'm talking about is healthy relationships across the board. So even those relationships that you have with your family, or other, or other people, friends, whatever, and just talking about how could you have the healthiest possible relationship. So here's some concepts. It's not all inclusive. It's not perfect. But I think it can be very helpful if you use some of the techniques or some of the concepts. So the first relationship that you probably have to put the most work in is the relationship that you have with yourself. Reality is if we are unhealthy for ourselves, we're probably going to be unhealthy for other people. So keep that concept in mind. If you got other people around you that are unhealthy, they're probably unhealthy for you. So when a person is unhealthy, generally speaking, they can't give, they're going to only take. So I highly recommend first working on that relationship first. How do you manage yourself with yourself? So now the next piece is communication, and every group that I've ever ran, or when I do individual sessions, most people say communication is key. It's extremely important. Well, if that's true, then what the fuck is the problem? If we all know this, then where are we missing the boat? Well, I just have to ask you to think about reality for what it is. You were raised in a particular environment, and the people around you were raised in a different environment. The people you allow into your life were raised a particular way. So think about how we learned how to communicate. Yeah, people. Maybe we saw a couple talking or friends talking, and we're like, okay, the way they talk to each other, I really like that. Or um, we've seen people that were, I don't know, they were communicating in a way where you didn't like it. So we kind of navigate our communication through experience. But generally speaking, how many folks watching this video have ever taken a course on healthy communication? And my guess is very few. A lot of us, if you went through to get your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree or whatever, there's generally a communication class, but that communication type is for business. It's in order to get something. And that's the problem, is that we use communication to get something instead of actually talking to each other. One of the concepts is to listen to be, speak to be understood, and listen to understand. Um, One of the biggest challenges, one of the common challenges, is when somebody's speaking, you're attempting to find a reply instead of hearing what's being said. So what will generally happen is the other person won't be heard or won't feel heard. And if they're not feeling heard, they're going to feel upset. And if they feel upset, that turns into an argument, this whole thing. So keep that in mind. Now, the other challenges to communication is opinions and beliefs. So ask you directly, do you have the right to your opinions? Do you have the right to your beliefs? Take a moment and think about that. Well, so does fucking everybody else. Everybody else has the right to their own opinion, has the right to their own beliefs. The challenge is when we want to be more right instead of just understanding that this is where this person is coming from, and they have a different belief than us, or they have a different opinion. What happens with opinions and beliefs, they go from being a concept in our mind and end up being something that is drilled into the heart, where if somebody doesn't agree with the opinion or the belief, it's almost like a direct attack. And if a person feels attacked, they're going to act. So that's where all these fights come from when we're talking about religious debates or political debates or things like that, is we're not actually attacking the concept. It feels like we're actually being attacked directly. So one of the ways to create healthy communication is creating boundaries. And if you've been around mental health, any time at all, you've probably heard the concept of boundaries. But my question is, do we really know what the hell that means? So think of any sporting event that you could go to. I don't care what, if you like a sport, whatever sport it is, doesn't matter. Every single sport has a boundary. And this is what happens every single time a boundary is crossed. All play stops. So, and then the refs stop and they say, okay, so what happened? And it could be a good thing. Somebody might have, if we're talking about football, somebody might have scored a goal. You look at it, it's a good goal, 6 points, that whole thing. Or if they went out of bounds, play stops, the ball goes right there. But we have a conversation about what happened. So the thing I'm going to ask you to do is think about what a boundary means for you. And there are different concepts on boundaries, but I'm only going to talk about two of them. One is a rigid boundary and one is a flexible boundary. So just to give you my example for me, what a rigid boundary is. So if somebody were to cross me physically or sexually, that's a rigid boundary for me. I'm not going to have a conversation with that person. This person showed exactly who they are. You do you, boo-boo, I'm out. Okay. So that for me is a rigid boundary. Not everybody agrees with that, and that's okay. I'm just giving you an example of where I'm at with a rigid boundary. So, and then we have something called a flexible boundary, meaning that something happened, I don't feel good about it, but I'm not necessarily going to walk away from the relationship because this happened. I'm going to try to seek more information. So let's say the example is somebody said something that was mean or hurtful. Okay. It's my job to recognize people are not mind readers. Okay. I don't know if you've taken a mind reading class, but if you believe you can mind read, I would ask you to go back to the college that gave you that course and get your money back because you fucking suck at it. Don't mind read people. You don't know what somebody else is thinking unless they tell you and they tell you the truth. That's the only way that you could possibly know what somebody else is thinking or what they know. So in that moment, when your boundary was crossed, it's your responsibility to explain that it was crossed, that it's not okay. And this is how communication starts to work. This is how healthy communication starts to work. So giving that example, somebody says something that's harmful. And so now it's my responsibility to say, hey, what you said isn't cool with me. Now, the conversation isn't over. I'm going to wait and I'm going to listen for what the response is. So the response could be, I don't care. Well, there's no more information to be had. This person just told you. They told me that, they don't care about my feelings. So there's nothing to fix. You do you, boo-boo, I'm out. I know you're unhealthy for me. That's okay. So now let's say the person hears you and they say, that wasn't my intention. I didn't mean to hurt you. You go, okay, fair enough. I'm still not done yet. I'm waiting for what's next. Because one thing that I want you to understand is a person can be authentically apologetic, telling you, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And in that moment, they mean it. And then they do it again. So an apology without behavior change is manipulation. What I'm looking for, I'm not looking for a perfect person. What I'm looking for is the effort to change the behavior. where if the person especially doesn't use the same statement that they used before, because keep in mind, if the person harms me in the same way another time, I know they know because I told them. Now I have a decision to make. So you have to decide. You're all, I don't have this for kids, so I'm expecting the people that are watching this are adults. You could be in an unhealthy relationship if you want to, but understand that when somebody tells you that they're going to be harmful to you, believe them. Okay. And then you have a decision to make on what to do. It's not my job to tell you what to do. It's just my job to say, hey, that behavior is probably not healthy. So what do you want to do about it? And in any relationship, people aren't perfect. They're going to do dumb stuff, and that's okay. I don't expect you to be perfect. I wouldn't expect anybody to expect me to be perfect. That whole thing. So let's talk about expectations and what we think should happen. So, what's the problem with expectations? Expectations come from how we were raised. So if you were raised in a particular environment where you've got, your caregivers act a particular way, or you see people in relationships and they act a particular way, then you might develop a thought that this is how relationships are and how they're supposed to be. The problem with that, it's unrealistic because the other person that you have this expectation for didn't have your experience. So the only way that this other person's going to know that you expect certain things is you got to tell them. Okay. And like if you do expectations, like I kind of do expectations, right? So in my head, I'll give an example. Let's say, I get off of work and I jump in the car, and in my head, I think the house should look a particular way, the food should be made a certain way, things should look a certain way when I open the door. Okay. So I open the door and it's not that. Automatically get pissed off. The other person didn't even know that that's what I expected to do, expected of them, that's what they're just supposed to know. It's just supposed to happen. So I gave myself permission to be pissed off at somebody else, and they didn't even know that they were supposed to do anything. Now, here's the thing with a healthy relationship. On my way home, if I had an expectation that I wanted the food cooked, or I wanted the house cleaned, or I want something to happen, right? In a healthy relationship, I can make the phone call and say, hey, can you cook, I don't know, one of my favorite meals? In a healthy relationship, the other person can say, no, I'm busy. And I can respect that. Okay. Versus saying, no, this is how things are supposed to be. So be cautious with that. And the moving into two people, there's this concept of compromise, right? And in a relationship, there's going to be compromise. Now, I think society as a whole doesn't necessarily understand what compromise means. I think people translate that into meeting in the middle. So no, meeting in the middle is one thing. Compromise means somebody loses, right? So the example is this. Let's say you and I, we decided that we're going to go into business together. And obviously, and I'm going to put in half the money, you're going to put in half the money, and we're going to try to make this work. And obviously we want this business to be successful. So, so now we have this particular relationship. Now, this person has equal say, I have equal say. And I want the building to be purple. And the other person says, well, I want it green. Meeting in the middle means that we would make it like purple and green. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. A compromise means that building is either going to be purple or it's going to be green. Somebody is going to lose, right? And it's okay, because other people have different interests than I do, and other people have different interests than you do, so different likes, things like that. That makes us human. So, and that's okay. Where it becomes probably unhealthy is like, let's say, all right, well, I compromise, the building's going to be green. Now I want a white picket fence around the building. And then the other person says, I want a chain link fence. let's say I compromise again, and now it's a chain link fence and it's green, but I have as much say as this other person. Where am I actually in this relationship? Is this we're talking about a boss and an employee, or are we talking about partners? So decide where you want to be in that partnership. If somebody is continuing to compromise, then somebody else is winning, and it's not an equal relationship. There's an imbalance of power, which could have a tendency to create a resentment. And then a resentment in a relationship is just obviously is going to be a problem with communication. Now, there was this one system that I was taught in the past. I'm retired from the Army, and for a short period of time, I was in a particular environment where the people there were the best at what they do. But even at the best, even the best people make mistakes. So I had this thing called a blue chip, red chip system. So think about that in your relationships, whether it's friendships, whether it's intimate relationships, whatever the case is, right? So think of a blue chip as this person did something good, and a red chip, this person did something that you don't like, right? And I would ask you over a period of time is to take a look at your bags of imaginary chips. And if you have a whole bunch of blue chips and just a couple red chips, that's probably a healthy relationship. Happy for you. I hope everything works out for, until the end of your life. However, if there's no blue chips, or there's only a couple blue chips in there, and there's a big bag of red chips, probably have an unhealthy relationship. And again, you're an adult. So if you want to stay in an unhealthy relationship, it's completely up to you. If you don't know how to get out of that relationship, or what to do, or what changes you need to make, that's where somebody like me comes in, or a social worker, or a counselor, or support group. People that know what they're talking about. Okay. I highly recommend staying away from anybody that's in a toxic relationship and asking them for their advice. Okay. They're only going to teach you how to stay in a toxic relationship. You want good advice, talk to somebody who's in a really healthy relationship and see what their ideas are. How is it that they're making that stuff work? Okay. So think about it though. If you, as the individual, become more healthy, what you have to be prepared for is people are going to start to disappear. People who are unhealthy do not like to be around healthy people. It's just how it works. So you have to be prepared to lose people when you become healthy. So those are just some of the tidbits of what a healthy relationship could look like, or what kind of things that you could do. Obviously, it's much more complicated than I can put on here for 20 minutes. But think about that. If any of the topics that I presented are not happening in your relationship, then consider what you want to do about it. And if you don't know what to do, that's when you ask for help. All right. I only wish you the best. I hope every relationship you ever have is amazing. All the best to you and your family. And until next time.